So if you look at the list of countries in the world in terms of percentage of women in their parliaments, the United States, I think you think you know the number and you're wrong, because while we stand still, other countries keep moving higher and higher. There are now 112 countries, 112 countries who are ahead of us in terms of the percentage of women. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about Afghanistan. I'm talking about Burundi, which the UN says is the unhappiest country on the face of the earth on their happiness scale. And yet they have managed to get more women in than we have. So let me put that into, that's the quantitative. Let me give you a couple of vignettes for the qualitative. And that is post-communism. The wall falls. I'm around. I'm in Vienna. And what I see is there's this plummet in terms of the percentage of women in the parliaments. Guess who's at the bottom? Yugoslavia, about 3% women. Guess who erupts into the most god-awful genocide, concentration camps, atrocities, sadistic atrocities? Yugoslavia. I think there's a connection there. So I'm working in Bosnia now, Bosnia. I'm hosting these negotiations. They're successful. So we go to the White House, and I've had these negotiators in my office at our home for dinner. I've had maps spread out all over my office. And so I know these people. 14 days. And so we're at the White House for the signing. In come President Izetbegovic, President Tudjman, President Clinton, and yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. And it's about a crowd a little bigger than y'all, but about this size. And so I look back at the crowd, and holy Toledo, it is gray suits. I mean, it is. There are no women. And I thought, how did I not see that? Like that is just weird, that in 14 days and nights I wouldn't see it. And I was part of this problem because I wasn't even looking at the gender piece. That's my failure story. And by the way, there was only one woman then when they put together the parliament in Bosnia itself, and that country is stuck. They put together the most ridiculous system, brought in all the hardliners, that had never been identified by being ethnic Serb or whatever. And now that country has been stuck for more than 20 years. So then contrast it, same time, Rwanda, awful, awful genocide. 10% of the population, as you know, wiped out in 100 days. But in come the troops that are driving out the genocidaire. And the general says, Rose, you're now the mayor of Kigali. Kigali, please? We're talking corpses stacked up on the sidewalks. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of kids running in the streets, trying to find parents who are dead. We're talking not a piece of paper. And yet he says to her, you're in charge. He says to somebody else, 26-year-old social worker, Nyumba, you're in charge of creating a commission on unity and reconciliation. Pull the country back together. And someone else, Beatrice, you're in charge of creating a legal system to get 500,000 accused perpetrators, get them out of the prisons, get them back into their villages. Do it with the grassroots, like make it happen. And they did. That's the thing, they did. And by the way, in the course of it, they became the #1 country in the world in terms of women's representation. #1. I mean, they're in the 60s, the 60%, 60, 62, 64. You all, this This can be done. It makes a big difference. There is a seismic shift. And as we talk about the politics here, we are talking about change. We are not talking about how many seats are being filled in our Congress. We're talking about revolution. We're talking about a wave of change in people's lives. The number of women that you have in the parliament, that's a symptom. And it's also a cause. If we don't respect women, if we aren't able to advance women, that's a symptom of our society. But it also has an effect, because the more women we have in the Congress, the better our women will be doing throughout their lives, throughout this society. So I am excited, you can tell, I'm excited about this. We are in a movement. And whether it's the Me Too and the Time's Up, or whether it's these women who are helping the kids do their march, March for Our Lives, or the women who are leading immigration reform. I love it when I turn on the news. I hate what the news is, but I love the fact that it's all these women delivering it. There are so many changes. We got to make it happen now at the political level, all right? And you are part of it. This is the moment. So I'm finished talking, and I'm gonna leave you with this little vignette, a 1 minute, that you'll see. And this is what we're talking about at the granular level. Just watch the interactions between these three women.
Feel that this compromise is enough, that a vote could happen today and government could be back open on Monday morning?
I think that there are discussions that need to take place this afternoon. I think it is of the highest priority that our leadership, Senator McConnell, Senator Schumer, engage in a level of discussion. We want to be able to provide that support, a base of conversation, but ultimately the determination will be up to the two of them. Yeah. That's the way the process works in the United States Senate.
One of the things that I think that we learned from the that's okay, Susan. But I want to point out these press people, one of these mean people. One of the things we learned from the last shutdown was that as time goes on, positions harden. It is absolutely our goal to make sure that there are discussions today with opportunities for compromise yet tonight. And so that is absolutely critical that we not continue this, number one, on behalf of the country, but I think also resolution gets more difficult the longer we wait.
What about President Trump?
So what we have been trying to do at the Center for American Women in Politics is to reframe what success looks like. And that we can't just be talking about how many more women are going to be serving as a result of election 2018. We need to look at other ways of talking about this story. First of all, women are outperforming men so far in the primaries, and this is across the board. Among women, women have a 49% win rate in House primaries right now, men 39%. And this carries through for non-incumbent women and men in both parties. We also need to look, I think, at important firsts. So, for instance, in Georgia, the first African-American woman nominee for governor, Stacey Abrams. In New Mexico, the first two Democratic Latinas nominated for governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham and Lupe Valdez. In Idaho, the first Native American woman nominated for governor, Paulette Jordan. In New Mexico, we are likely to see the very first Native American woman ever go to Congress. We are likely to see the first Latinas elected to Congress from Texas. We are likely to see in Pennsylvania, a state that currently has no women in its congressional delegation, send possibly 4 or more women to Washington after November. Iowa may elect its first woman to the U.S. House in history. The youngest women may be elected to Congress. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York and Abby Finkenauer in Iowa are likely winners, or possible winners in the Iowa case, but we're looking at young women now. In Mississippi, we may see the first elected woman, not appointed, go to Congress from the state of Mississippi. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, who was appointed to fill out an unexpired term, now is up for election. We're also seeing an increase in voter participation. We don't know yet if this is really being driven by women, but we're seeing it largely on the Democratic side, which makes us think that in large part it's being driven by women. We're obviously seeing an increased level of political activism among women. We're seeing that in all of the, quote, resistance movements that are going on out there, being led in large part by women. And then in political donations, we're seeing some early signs, according to the Center for Responsive Politics, with women giving more at small levels, but giving more. And that's an important step for women as political donors. We also think that what we're seeing this year, and we don't have data yet to back this up, but it certainly seems that way anecdotally. For years, we have been doing research asking men and women who serve in state legislatures about what got them to run and were they recruited or not. And men overwhelmingly have told us in the past that they basically woke up one morning, looked in the mirror and said, I'd be a great state legislator, and they run for office. Women need to be recruited to run for office, which makes political parties very important to them. I think we're seeing a shift this time around. I think many of these women who are running this time did not get asked. Nobody asked them to run, they just did it. And so the question that we have moving forward is this a shift? Is this a one-off, or is this a shift in a trend that will continue? We also know that one of the things that we're seeing in campaign ads and in the campaign strategies is what our partners on Gender Watch 2018, the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, talks about is that 360-degree candidate. We are seeing women running with sort of all aspects of their lives out there and showing and visible and kind of bringing all of their experiences to the table and talking about those experiences in different ways. So whether that's sharing their own personal Me Too story, talking about their student debt, breastfeeding, showing off tattoos, personal credit card debt, family experiences with opioid addiction, mental health struggles. These things are all being used and out there in ways that we have not seen before and are giving us that 360 view of these women candidates. And that really goes against what a lot of the kind of conventional wisdom has been out there for women. One of the things that we've often seen in the past is women are told, don't let people know that you have young children at home, because the first question is who's going to take care of your kids if you actually get elected. Now women are running and their children are right there by their sides. And in fact, that leads to another change that we've seen in this cycle, which is a woman who is running for Congress in New York who went to the FEC and said, I want to be able to use my campaign funds to pay for childcare costs related to my campaign. And she was granted that. That's a victory. Whether she wins in November or not, that is a victory for women candidates across this country and into the future. So to me, that is another level of success. So shifting the measures of success are really important to sustaining the engagement of women beyond this election cycle. If we are going to make sure that this isn't just a blip on the screen, we have to make sure that women don't lose the momentum, no matter the outcome in November.
What would you want to say to them about covering this election cycle, covering the sea change? What's missing from the current reporting that you'd wish would get, covered some more? If you could leave them with one piece, what would it be? So I'm going to go to each of you, and I'll start with you, Teresa.
I would say that to really look at how incredibly qualified the women are. So we hear the narrative that women are running, and that is not the resume. The depth and why they're competitive is because they're incredibly qualified. Let's look at Gina Ortiz against Will Hurd. She is a combat veteran, whip smart, and has an understanding of increased national security against a former CIA analyst. Talk about a pitting quality against experience, almost at equal footing. And we often like to talk about women just as gender, but it's really how incredibly qualified they are, and they're throwing themselves into the ring in incredibly competitive races, and they're winning.
I think I would echo that, particularly as you talk about covering women of color. We obviously can't separate our ethnicity and race and gender, and they all together are very important. But being able to move beyond, as we celebrate first, the ability to talk about why that woman is uniquely qualified to be first, and doing some historical, rooting some of the reporting in the historical nature of the moment. It is, again, exciting that there's a record number of Black women running, and since 2014, we've seen major surges for Black women. In 2014, there was only one Black woman serving as a mayor of a top 100 city, largest top 100 city. We now have 7, right? And that's 7 within a 4-year span. So we celebrate that, but we are still underrepresented and underserved. So I think it's important to talk about the history-making moment that we're in, but that it is actually connected in the fact that there's still a deficit. And I think finally it is us continuing to push cultural and gender bias in the way we report about women and women of color in particular, and really going like, let me reread this piece to see if there's that, unintentional ability to discount the viability of a woman and a woman of color based on the way that we're shaping the narrative or interviewing others to shape the narrative. Because when you put out these unintentional biases, it actually, from a voter perspective, then puts that question that may have already been on their mind about the qualification and experience of that woman. And so I think it is a unique opportunity to share our stories in a very meaningful way in this moment, but also rooting it in the ability to shape a narrative about the importance of qualification. We are definitely about not electing Black women for Black women's sake, but being able to celebrate this moment in a real way.
And I would just love to see more pieces about down ballot races. Mm-hmm. There are 520,000 offices in this country. And we at Emerge America, for example, have a whole project around getting more women running for district attorneys. That is such an important position. It's also a pipeline position. People like Kamala Harris started as DA. A couple of other senators started as district attorneys. And it's pivotal if you care about criminal justice, and so many of us do. So covering more down ballot races. Also more pieces about what is it like to be in office, profiles, days in the life. I think that there are a lot of people who think, and I've read this, that politicians don't shop for themselves, that they ride in limousines. It would be great to see some pieces about what is it really like. What is it, right? They don't, right? What is it like to be in office at different levels? And finally, I would love to see more pieces about what these women accomplish when they're in office. Because right now, we're not seeing a lot of accomplishments at the national, at the federal level, but at the state level, there are a lot of great things happening. And these women are leading the charge, so I'd love to see some more of that.
I would just add to that from the Republican perspective, cover our women. We've got some really great women running this cycle, and a lot of them are running in very winnable seats and districts, and they're going to be incredible members. And I think I'd love to see just more coverage. And the good news is it's not too late. August, very important primary month. We've got Florida, Minnesota, Kansas, Arizona, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and we've got some really powerful women running in competitive primaries in these states, and I'd love to see more coverage of them.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important that there is a recognition that woman does not equal win. That there is not this magical bump that is automatic, that each and every one of these women who are winning these primaries, they are fighting their way through these primaries. And there is no night at Emily's List where the champagne has already been popped before the AP has announced the actual winners. And that is something that we have had to push back against a lot, that there is sort of this inevitability of a win, and it just simply is not true. And we have a lot of candidates who are grinding it out, and when the story is told that way, it can impact their resources, it can impact a number of the dynamics even around voter turnout. So really telling the story in a way that is reflective of the truth around what these elections really are looking like.
Just to, not to put too fine a point on it, but again, throw the pitch out to the media in the room. You know, there are great Republican candidates as well, you know, who I think deserve a chance to be asked about them too. You know, as Julie mentioned, you know, wonderful qualifications, cool stories, you know, vets, mothers, professionals, you name it, all running, all who have a great story to tell and, you know, deserve a chance, I think, as well.